Hey, hello, and welcome to video 6.1 in the story of Larissa, the lockdown Landrover's restoration. It's all been just a little bit disjointed. There's some things that I can do, there's some things that I can't do. This is the second video of rust repairs. In this video, I'm going to be attending to rust repairs that other people have had a go at and not made a very good job of. Just like the last Series 3 Land Rover that I did, the front grille support radiator mount has taken a lot of rust. This one's had an awful patch tack welded to the inside, and the rust hasn't been removed, and it's continued to grow between the two pieces of metal. You can plainly see what they call heavage, where the rust has flaked and taken it all away. I'm going to be splitting these spot welds and taking this awful piece of metal off so that I can have a look underneath and see what I'm faced with. In the previous video, I introduced you to the two most used tools that I use when I'm doing rust repairs. One is this small grinder with the 1mm cutting disc, and the other tool is this beauty, the thin splitting chisel, which is used for paring two pieces of metal away from each other, splitting spot welds and little levering jobs. Well, that's pretty much as I expected. Horrible. I can throw that right away and decide how much of this is going to get cleaned up and how much of it is going to get replaced. Well, obviously this centrepiece is going to be cut out, but because the grille support is made of very heavy material, the two end pieces just need a little clean up. So I'm going to mark out with a scriber and get my 1mm slitting disc again, and I'm going to remove the worst section. And I can use that removed piece as a pattern for making a new one. Marking out where the mounting holes go will be dead easy because those parts weren't too badly rusted. Now I have to add 1mm to the outside edge of this because I need to allow for the thickness of the cutting disc. I'm just going to mark and centre punch where those three holes go, and then when I've cut it out and bent it, I'll be able to take it to the drill press and drill those three holes. When I'm doing big cuts, I throw a bit of lubricant on there, and it just helps the thing to last a few more years, I guess. This is a piece of angle iron that I use for doing bends in. Keep meaning to make myself a proper bender, but it's not something that's happened yet. It's surprising how nice I managed to get these things looking, considering that they've been severely bashed with a hammer. Next comes setting the thing up back in its hole. I'm using a variety of clamps and some pieces of metal in behind to get everything at exactly the right level. Find the right clamps for the job. 2 little packers of metal to fit in behind them so that it fits absolutely flush, and then I can start getting some tack welds onto there. Tacking from the inside means that I don't have as much to clean up on the outside where it shows. There is, however, always a little bit of tidying up that needs to be done, so I'll just attend to the parts that I couldn't get from the back. Then I'll go over it with a wire buff just to get the dingleberries off it, and then I can hit it with a grinder. Get everything down to level with an angle grinder, and once that's done, it's just a short clean up with the flap wheel, and the whole thing's just about done. I think there'll always be a little bit of hammer and dolly work just to finish off, just to make sure that things absolutely smooth. I'll just work my way up and down the weld with a hammer and dolly to make sure that I use the absolute minimum amount of bob. Now I use a phosphoric acid etching compound. You can see that I've painted over the bare steel with this zinc phosphate, and it's left an almost lightly galvanized finish over the top that's going to protect it until I can get around to painting it. But you can see, there it is in its bare form. It's a fairly tidy repair. Nobody's going to know that it's been done by the time it's got just a thin skin of bog over it and some primer. So what's going on out here? That's right, I've got these pillars to finish, haven't I? And the guards. Yeah, now, this was a bit of a nuisance. I think this Landrover was built just before Smoko on a Friday, because where the 2 halves of the guard were bolted together from new, there's an awful lip. So what I'm going to do is strip this guard down, wrestle and fight to get all of the nuts and bolts out, because those things have been well crudded up. But I'm going to undo those, get them out, split the seam, clean out the hard, old, horrible sealant, and I'm going to put some new sealant in there and massage this guard back into shape. So here it is split, and I've cleaned out the seam. I've got the old sealant out. I'm going to do a dry fit first. I'm going to put some nuts and bolts back into these holes, and I'm going to move the thing around and just do a test fit and see how I go. See how close I can get it. Well, with it all clamped up and doing it by feel and by eye, I'm quite happy with the way that looks now. But best I check the inside and make sure that the holes still line up. Yes, they do. All the bolt holes line up. So now I can commit myself to putting this back together the way it should have been from the factory. And you'll be able to see how I just make sure that there's nothing left in that seam with the scraper. And then I'm going to seal all the way down with a generous amount of sealer. I don't mind wasting a little bit, just as long as I've got a good seal all the way down. And now, hopefully, I can bolt this thing up and adjust it how I did just a couple of minutes ago. And get this thing looking the way it should have done when it came from the factory in Solihull 45 years ago. Okay. Well, we better get some nuts and bolts in it before it sets. So I've got the thing clamped up in the middle of its span with those G-clamp bolt clips, and I'm getting a few bolts in. I'm not going to do any of the bolts up until I've got them all in. And then what I will do is just nip them all up at the same time while I run my hand back and forth across the seam on the outside, just feeling to see how it goes. There are 5 bolts that run along the top of this guard, so I'm going to do the middle one first and then 2 either side. I'll tell you what though, video doesn't do it justice. Now that I've done it, the seam is just beautiful. No, you guys will just never quite know how good it is until you see it painted. Anyway, that was just a little something that I felt did need doing just to make it extra good. Now this right hand guard has had a bit of a boof, and so the next thing I've got to do after fixing that seam is get in here and tidy up this front panel. It doesn't look too bad. I'm going to pull these lights out, and you're going to see just how much bog there is in this thing in a minute. But just for now, you can get a bit of a visual on it. There you go. Look down where the indicator and the park light were. See that bulge in? And those waves? And yet on the outside, it's actually looking quite flat. That means there's about 8 to 10 millimeters of bog in there. So I'm going to pull that out and panel beat it properly using a straight edge and a dolly and a panel beating hammer. And I'm going to spend an hour or so just tippy tapping away on the front here, getting it all flat. And when it's done, there will be less than 1 millimeter of bog instead of 8 or 10 millimeters of bog. Now here's something that I've been wanting to get back into for a day or two. This is the left hand pillar. I've just welded a patch in the top and I've just tacked a patch into the bottom here. This is a complex little repair. It's got an inner part and an outer part, so it's double skinned. So there's the top fully welded, there's the bottom one fully welded and linished off, and now I've got to make up a second part to go over that. There it is, sitting in place. I'm just about to weld that up. You can see how the bottom turns in, and there's a wee bit left open as a water drain. So I'm going to get some tacks on that thing. There you go, that's all welded and ground back. And now it just needs a light finish with a flat wheel, and I can get some primer on there. I can see one little bubble in the weld, so I'll need the tiniest wipe of bog over it to fill up that hole. And here it is looking pretty bloody amazing. As I say, needs the tiniest wipe of bog over the weld in the bottom, and there's also one little pinhole there where I did a plug weld, but I'll blow some primer over it first. Right, so there you go. Video 6.1. I've got all the rust sorted in the Landrover now. It's the end of week 3 of our lockdown. We've got 7 more days to go, and on the 5th day we find out whether it's going to be extended or whether we're going to be allowed out to play.